Welcome back to my channel. Today, we are doing a deep dive into a book, The Mountain is You by Brianna Wiest. But before we start, I have one favor to ask you. If my channel has helped you in any way, please subscribe, like, share, and press the bell icon so you get the notification when a new summary is uploaded. Chapter 1, The Mountain is You, Deep Dive. The core philosophy of this first chapter is a radical shift in perspective. The problems we face are not actually obstacles in our way, but rather a reflection of our internal resistance. Brianna Wiest opens the book with a powerful metaphor, the mountain. For years, we look at the mountain and think it is something we must conquer or a barrier preventing us from reaching our real life. But Wiest argues that the mountain is you. 1. The real definition of self-sabotage. Wiest begins by dismantling the idea that we self-sabotage because we are broken or lazy. She explains that self-sabotage is actually a survival mechanism. It is the subconscious mind trying to protect us from something it perceives as a threat. Even if you consciously want a promotion, a healthy relationship, or a fit body, your subconscious might associate those things with danger. Perhaps a promotion means more visibility, which triggers a fear of being judged. Perhaps a healthy relationship feels unsafe because you grew up in chaos and peace feels like the calm before the storm. Because your brain is designed for survival rather than happiness, it will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven every single time. 2. The conflict of needs. This chapter explores the internal civil war. On one side, you have your conscious mind, which is logical and goal-oriented. On the other, you have your subconscious mind, which is emotional and driven by past conditioning. When these two are at odds, the subconscious always wins. You find yourself hitting the snooze button, picking fights with people you love, or procrastinating on your dreams. This isn't because you aren't capable. It's because a part of you still believes that staying where you are is the only way to stay safe. To stop sabotaging, you have to stop fighting yourself and start understanding the hidden benefit of your stuckness. 3. The coexistence of pain and growth. A major point Wiest makes is that discomfort is the price of admission for a new life. Most people stop when they feel uncomfortable because they interpret that feeling as a sign that they are doing something wrong. Wiest flips this. She suggests that the growing pains of change are actually signs that you are successfully stretching beyond your previous limits. The mountain is the work you avoided doing. It is the trauma you haven't processed, the boundaries you haven't set, and the truths you haven't spoken. The mountain exists to force you into the person you need to become to climb it. Identifying the resistance. In this chapter, we are encouraged to look at our lives and identify where we feel the most stuck. Are you stuck in a job you hate? Are you stuck in a cycle of toxic dating? Are you stuck in a loop of negative self-talk? Wiest explains that resistance shows up as the gap. The gap is the space between who you are today and the person you know you are meant to be. The wider that gap, the more psychological tension you feel. This tension is often misdiagnosed as anxiety or depression, but Wiest suggests it is actually your soul's way of telling you that you are out of alignment. The upper limit problem. Wiest touches on the concept of the upper limit. Each of us has an internal thermostat for how much success, love, or happiness we can tolerate. When we exceed that limit, we subconsciously trigger a cooling mechanism, sabotage, to bring us back down to a level where we feel normal. Chapter 1 challenges us to raise our baseline and get comfortable with being happy. 6. The ego versus the soul. Finally, Chapter 1 discusses the role of the ego. The ego wants to be right, it wants to be safe, and it wants to be perceived a certain way. The soul, however, wants to grow, expand, and experience truth. The mountain is the ultimate test of which one you will listen to. To climb, you must be willing to let your old identity die. You cannot become the new version of yourself while clinging to the old, safe, stuck version of yourself. Disclaimer. The following What I've Learned section is based on my personal interpretation and is not an official summary provided by the author. What I've learned. I learned that I have been viewing my obstacles all wrong. I used to think that life was happening to me, but after reading this chapter, I realized that I have been a co-author in my own stuckness. I learned that my laziness is actually just fear in disguise. I also realized that I have a very low upper limit for happiness. Whenever things start going really well in my life, I start looking for the catch. I start worrying that something bad is about to happen, which usually leads me to act out or withdraw. This chapter taught me that I need to stop treating peace like it's a threat. I've learned that the mountain isn't there to stop me. It's there to show me where I am still holding on to my past. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? I am starting to ask, what is this trying to teach me about myself? Chapter 2, The Types of Self-Sabotage. In the second chapter, Brianna Wiest moves from the abstract concept of the mountain into the specific, gritty ways we actually manifest resistance in our daily lives. If chapter 1 was about realizing that you are the mountain, chapter 2 is about understanding how you build it. Wiest argues that self-sabotage is never random. It is a highly calculated, albeit subconscious, response to our deepest fears. 1. Resistance as a shield. Wiest begins by explaining that every self-sabotaging behavior has a benefit. We often look at our bad habits and think they are purely destructive, but they are actually protecting us from something we fear more. For example, procrastination isn't just about laziness. It is often a way to manage the fear of being judged. If you wait until the last minute to do a project and it fails, you can tell yourself, it only failed because I didn't have enough time. This protects your ego from the much scarier thought, I gave it my all and I still wasn't good enough. By sabotaging the process, you provide yourself with a built-in excuse for failure. 2. The comfort of the familiar. A major theme in this whole chapter is the familiarity trap. Human beings are biologically wired to prefer certainty over uncertainty, even if that certainty is miserable. This is why people stay in toxic relationships or dead-end jobs. The brain calculates that the known pain of a bad situation is safer than the unknown possibility of a better one. Wiest identifies uprooting as a key sabotage type. This happens when things start going well. Perhaps you meet a great partner or land a dream job, and you suddenly feel an overwhelming urge to destroy it. You pick a fight or find a flaw. Why then? Because the happiness is new. Bam. And new feels like a threat to your internal equilibrium. You uproot your progress to return to the soil of the struggle you are used to. 3. Perfectionism. The ultimate barrier. Wiest provides a blistering critique of perfectionism. She defines it not as a quest for excellence, but as a quest for invulnerability. If we can just do everything perfectly, we think we can protect ourselves from criticism, rejection, or shame. The problem is that perfection is an impossible standard. Therefore, the perfectionist stays paralyzed. They never launch the business, never write the book, and never take the risk because they are waiting for a state of perfection that doesn't exist. This is sabotage disguised as high standards. It keeps you on the sidelines of your own life, safe from the messiness of growth. 4. Numbing and distraction. In the modern world, one of the most common ways we sabotage our mountain climb is through numbing. Wiest points out that we use food, scrolling, substances, or even busyness to drown out the quiet voice of our intuition. When we feel the itch that we are meant for more, it creates an uncomfortable tension. Instead of using that tension as fuel to change, we use distractions to lower the volume of the discomfort. We choose temporary relief over long-term resolution. Wiest argues that we aren't addicted to the distraction itself. We are addicted to the escape from ourselves. 5. Emotional hitting of the ceiling. Wiest expands on the upper limit concept mentioned in Chapter 1. She explains that we each have a subconscious happiness set point. When we experience a breakthrough, we often experience a vulnerability hangover. We feel exposed by our own success. To cope, we engage in worrying. Worrying is a form of sabotage because it is an attempt to rehearse tragedy so we aren't caught off guard. We think that by being miserable in anticipation of something bad, we are somehow protecting ourselves. In reality, we are just ruining the present moment and reinforcing the idea that we don't deserve to feel good. 6. The martyrdom complex. Another subtle form of sabotage discussed is playing the victim or the martyr. By constantly being the person who has it the hardest or who sacrifices everything for others, we avoid the responsibility of our own happiness. If we are always fixing others or complaining about our circumstances, we never have to face the terrifying question, what would I do if I had no one to blame but myself? 7. Choosing the hard Wiest concludes the chapter by reminding us that both staying stuck and growing are hard. It is hard to be in an unfulfilling marriage, and it is hard to go through a divorce and build a new life. It is hard to be broke, and it is hard to do the disciplined work to build wealth. The difference is that one hard leads to a dead end, while the other hard leads to the top of the mountain. Self-sabotage is the act of choosing the hard that keeps us exactly where we are. What have I learned? This chapter was a huge wake-up call for me regarding my own busyness. I realized that I often fill my schedule with low-priority tasks specifically so I can tell myself I'm too busy to work on my real dreams. It's a way of avoiding the risk of failure. I also learned that my tendency to worry when things are going well isn't being prepared. It's actually a way I sabotage my joy because I'm afraid to be happy. I've realized that I have been uprooting my own peace because I grew up thinking that life is supposed to be a struggle. I learned that I need to get better at being okay. I need to practice sitting in silence without reaching for my phone to numb the slight discomfort of being alone with my thoughts. Most importantly, I learned that I've been using perfectionism as a shield to stay small, and I'm ready to start being messy if it means I'm actually moving forward. Chapter 3. Mastering the Body and Mind. In the third chapter of The Mountain Is You, Brianna Wiest shifts the focus toward the physiological and psychological tools required to stop the cycle of self-sabotage. If the first two chapters were about identifying the mountain and the tools of sabotage, Chapter 3 is about the actual mechanics of change. Wiest posits that you cannot simply think your way into a new life. You have to physically and mentally regulate yourself into one. 1. The body is the foundation. Wiest explains that many of our mental problems are actually physical ones. When we are in a state of chronic stress or fight or flight, our brain's prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic and long-term planning, effectively shuts down. In this state, we cannot climb the mountain because our body thinks it is being hunted by a predator. To master the mind, you must first master the nervous system. Wiest emphasizes that self-sabotage is often a response to a nervous system that is overwhelmed. If your body doesn't feel safe, your mind will never allow you to take risks. Therefore, the work of self-mastery begins with basic physical regulation: sleep, nutrition, and breathing. These aren't just wellness tips. They are the prerequisites for higher-level thinking. 2. Interpreting your triggers. A trigger is a sudden, intense emotional reaction to an external stimulus. We suggest that instead of seeing triggers as things to be avoided, we should see them as maps. A trigger shows you exactly where you have unhealed trauma or an unmet need. When you are triggered, your body is essentially experiencing a flashback to a time when you weren't safe. If someone's success triggers your anger, it's not because they are doing something wrong. It's because their success highlights a part of you that feels inadequate or stagnant. Chapter 3 teaches us to stop reacting to the trigger and start investigating it. Ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me about my own life? 3. The difference between intuition and fear. One of the most profound sections of this chapter is the distinction between your gut feeling, intuition, and your anxiety, fear. Many people stay stuck because they mistake their fear for intuition. They say, I have a bad feeling about this project, when what they really mean is, I am scared of failing at this project. Wiest provides a clear guide. Intuition is usually quiet, calm, and neutral. It feels like a knowing or a steady pull toward a certain direction. It focuses on the present moment. Fear anxiety is loud, frantic, and obsessive. It is usually focused on a what-if scenario in the future. It often involves a racing heart and a sense of impending doom. Mastery involves learning to ignore the loud voice of fear so you can finally hear the quiet voice of intuition. 4. Building mental strength through exposure. Wiest argues that the only way to overcome the mountain is through incremental exposure. You cannot wait until you aren't scared to take action. You have to take action while you are scared, thereby proving to your brain that the threat isn't real. This is where the concept of the baseline comes back. To raise your baseline of what you can handle, you must willingly step into small amounts of discomfort. If you are afraid of public speaking, you don't start at a stadium. You start by speaking up in a meeting. This widens your comfort zone until the thing that used to sabotage you no longer feels like a threat. 5. The role of logical fallacies. Wiest explores how our minds lie to us to keep us safe. She discusses catastrophizing, assuming the worst-case scenario will happen, and emotional reasoning, believing that because you feel like a failure, you're a failure. By identifying these logical fallacies, you can begin to edit your thoughts. Self-mastery is the ability to see a thought like, nobody likes me, and recognize it as a symptom of a bad mood rather than a statement of fact. You learn to be the observer of your thoughts rather than the victim of them. 6. The necessity of emotional release. Finally, Wiest discusses the importance of letting feelings move through you. Many of us sabotage because we are clogged with old, unprocessed emotions. We spend so much energy trying not to feel sad or not to feel angry that we have no energy left to build a new life. Chapter 3 encourages catharsis, allowing yourself to cry, scream, or grieve. Once the emotional energy is released, the need to sabotage, which was just a way to distract from that hidden pain, often disappears. What I learned that my gut feelings were actually just my anxiety disguised as wisdom. For years, I avoided opportunities because I had a bad feeling, but now I see that I was just afraid of being seen. I learned that my body is like an instrument. If it's out of tune, stressed, tired, or poorly fed, it's impossible to play a good life song. I also realized that I've been catastrophizing as a way to control the future. I thought that by imagining the worst, I wouldn't be hurt when it happened. But this chapter taught me that I was just hurting myself in advance. I've learned that I need to start trusting the quiet voice and stop giving so much power to the loud, frantic one. Most importantly, I learned that I don't need to fix my feelings. I just need to feel them and let them pass so they stop blocking my path up the mountain. Chapter 4, Becoming Emotionally Intelligent. In the 4th chapter, Brianna Wiest delves into the concept of emotional intelligence, EQ, not just as a buzzword, but as the fundamental skill required to stop self-sabotage. She argues that the reason we get stuck is that we are emotionally illiterate. We don't know how to interpret the signals our bodies are sending us, so we react to them as if they are emergencies. 1. Emotional intelligence as a survival skill. Wiest redefines EQ as the ability to sit with an emotion without immediately needing to act on it. Most self-sabotage is simply a reflex to an uncomfortable feeling. If you feel lonely, you might text an ex. If you feel overwhelmed, you might binge-watch TV. These are impulsive reactions designed to numb the feeling. Emotional intelligence is the gap between the feeling and the action. It is the ability to say, I feel lonely right now, and that is okay. I don't need to fix it with a bad decision. By increasing your emotional intelligence, you decrease the power your impulses have over your life. 2. The purpose of each emotion. A key part of this chapter is the breakdown of what our emotions are actually trying to achieve. Wiest posits that no emotion is bad. They are all trying to communicate something essential for our survival and growth. Anger is a signal that your boundaries have been crossed or that you are witnessing an injustice. It is protective energy. Sadness is the process of shedding. It is the body's way of accepting that something has ended so you can eventually move on. Guilt is a moral compass. It tells you when your actions are out of alignment with your values. Fear is a signal that you are entering the unknown. It is meant to make you alert, not to make you stop. 3. Emotional processing versus emotional numbing. Wiest explains that emotions are like tunnels. You have to go all the way through them to get to the light on the other side. When we sabotage, we are essentially building a wall inside the tunnel so we don't have to keep walking. But this just keeps us trapped in the dark. Processing an emotion involves 3 steps. 1. Identification. Naming exactly what you feel. E.g., I am not just stressed, I am feeling unappreciated. 2. Validation. Allowing the feeling to exist without telling yourself you shouldn't feel that way. 3. Physical release. Letting the energy of the emotion leave your body through movement, crying, or deep breathing. 4. The logic of feelings. While we often think feelings are illogical, Wiest argues they have a very specific logic based on our past experiences. If you were bitten by a dog as a child, feeling fear around a dog as an adult is logical to your nervous system. To gain self-mastery, you have to acknowledge the logic of your feelings without letting them dictate your current reality. You can say, it makes sense that I feel scared of this new job because I was fired once before, but that doesn't mean I am going to be fired today. This is the peak of emotional intelligence, honoring the past feeling while staying grounded in the present truth. 5. Developing affect tolerance. Affect tolerance is your ability to handle intense emotions without breaking. Many people sabotage because they have a low tolerance for emotional intensity. They are afraid that if they start crying, they will never stop, or if they get angry, they will lose control. We suggest that we build this tolerance by leaning in to small discomforts. The more you prove to yourself that you can survive a bad feeling, the less power that feeling has to derail your life. You stop being afraid of your own heart. What I learned that I have been treating my emotions like enemies instead of messengers. Whenever I felt bad, I would judge myself for it, which only made the feeling last longer. I realized that my anger was actually a sign that I hadn't set healthy boundaries with the people in my life. Instead of being angry at them, I learned that I needed to be firm for myself. I also learned the difference between wallowing and processing. I used to think that thinking about my problems for hours was processing, but Wiest helped me see that was just looping. Real processing involves letting the feeling hit you physically and then letting it go. Most importantly, I've learned that I don't have to be a slave to my moods. I can be booked and still do the work. I can be anxious and still show up. My feelings are the weather, but I am the mountain. Chapter 5, Releasing the Past. In the 5th chapter, Brianna Wiest addresses one of the most significant anchors holding us back from climbing our mountain, the past. She argues that we aren't actually held back by what happened to us, but by our attachment to what happened. Releasing the past isn't about forgetting. It is about digesting our experiences so they no longer sit like a heavy weight in our subconscious. 1. The trap of should have been. Wiest identifies the primary source of our suffering as the gap between the life we have and the life we think we should have had. Many of us are stuck in a cycle of grief, not for a person, but for a version of our lives that never materialize. We stay in a state of sabotage because we are waiting for a different past to come and save us. To release the past, you must first accept that it is over and that it could not have happened any other way. Wiest introduces the idea that every choice we made in the past was based on the level of awareness and survival tools we had at that time. To hold your current self responsible for the mistakes of your younger self is a form of self-sabotage because it prevents you from moving into the future. 2. Validating the former you. A profound point made in this chapter is that your past bad behaviors were actually your best solutions at the time. If you were a people pleaser, it was likely because you didn't feel safe being yourself. If you were aggressive, it was because you felt you needed to fight to be heard. Instead of looking back with shame, Wiest encourages us to look back with compassion. When you validate the younger version of yourself, you stop the internal war. You realize that you don't need to fix who you were. You just need to thank that version of yourself for getting you through the fire and then gently ask them to step aside so the current you can take the lead. 3. The myth of closure. We often wait to move on until we get closure, an apology from an ex, a recognition from a parent, or a sense of justice. Wiest argues that waiting for someone else to give you closure is giving them control over your mountain. Closure is an internal click. It happens when you decide that your present happiness is more important than your past pain. You don't need a conversation with someone else to find peace. You need a conversation with yourself where you decide that you are no longer willing to carry the luggage of a situation that has already ended. 4. Overcoming the ego death. Releasing the past often feels like dying. This is because our identities are often built around our wounds. If you have spent 10 years being the person who was wronged, who are you without that story? Wiest explains that we sabotage our healing because we are afraid of the vacuum that is left behind when we let go of our trauma. We have to be willing to go through an ego death, the stripping away of our old stories, to make room for a new, healthier identity. It is uncomfortable and disorienting, but it is the only way to reach the summit. 5. Cleaning out the subconscious attic. We suggest that our past exists in our current life through our habits, our triggers, and our physical environment. She encourages a purge of everything that keeps us anchored to a version of ourselves we no longer want to be. This includes the digital past, deleting old photos or messages that trigger a loop of regret. The physical past, getting rid of clothes or items that carry the vibration of a low point in your life. The mental past, identifying the core stories you tell about yourself, I'm the one who always gets left, and actively challenging them. What I've learned. I learned that I have been using my past as a legal defense for why I'm not successful today. I realized that by constantly talking about what happened to me, I was keeping the wound open and fresh. This chapter taught me that I don't need an apology from the people who hurt me to be happy. I can give myself the apology by deciding to live a life so good that the past pain becomes irrelevant. I also learned that I was strangely attached to my sadness because it felt like a safe identity. I didn't know who I would be if I wasn't the struggling artist or the misunderstood friend. I've learned that letting go isn't a one-time event where the feelings disappear. It's a daily practice of choosing the present moment over a memory. I'm finally understanding that the mountain of my past only has as much power as I give it today. Chapter 6. Building a New Future. In the 6th chapter, Brianna Wiest moves us from the clearing phase into the construction phase. Once you have identified your sabotage, processed your emotions, and released your past, you are left with a blank slate. This chapter is about the practical, daily architecture of a life that supports your highest self rather than your smallest fears. 1. The myth of the quantum leap. Many people wait for a single massive moment of transformation, a big break, or a sudden surge of willpower to change their lives. Wiest argues that this is another form of sabotage. Real change is boring, quiet, and incremental. It is found in your baseline habits. To build a new future, you must change what you do on an average Tuesday at 2 p.m. Wiest emphasizes that the way you do anything is the way you do everything. If your daily routine is chaotic and reactive, your life will be chaotic and reactive. Self-mastery is built through the micro-habit, the small, repetitive actions that eventually create a new path of least resistance in your brain. 2. Radical responsibility. Building a future requires you to stop being a victim of circumstance and start being the architect of your experience. Wiest challenges readers to take radical responsibility for everything in their current reality. This doesn't mean you are to blame for everything that happened to you, but you are responsible for how you respond to it now. When you take responsibility, you take back your power. If you are waiting for the world to change so you can feel better, you are a prisoner. If you decide that you are responsible for your own peace, your own income, and your own health, the mountain suddenly becomes climbable because you are the one holding the map. 3. Choosing your hard Wiest returns to the idea that life is going to be difficult regardless of which path you take. It is hard to be disciplined with your money, and it is hard to be in debt. It is hard to do the work to heal your relationships, and it is hard to be lonely. It is hard to push yourself at the gym, and it is hard to live with a body that feels weak. The difference is that the hard of growth has an expiration date and a reward at the end. The hard of stagnation is a permanent state of suffering. Building a new future is simply the process of choosing the hard that leads to the person you want to become. 4. Mental rehearsal and clarity. To build a future, you have to be able to see it. However, Wiest warns against fantasy, which is an escape from reality. Instead, she advocates for mental rehearsal. This involves visualizing yourself navigating the difficult parts of your new life. Don't just visualize the trophy. Visualize the early mornings, the difficult conversations, and the moments where you feel like quitting. By rehearsing how the highest version of you handles stress, you build the neural pathways necessary to actually execute that behavior when the time comes. 5. Social alignment. Your future is heavily influenced by your social ecosystem. Wiest explains that as you climb the mountain, you will inevitably outgrow certain people. This is one of the most painful parts of building a new future. Often we sabotage our growth because we are afraid of losing our friends or being too much for our families. But staying small to keep others comfortable is a disservice to everyone. Building a new future requires you to surround yourself with people who are also climbing or who at least respect your ascent. What I've learned. I learned that I've been waiting for a hero to show up and change my life, but I am the only hero I have. I realized that my big dreams were failing because my daily habits were weak. This chapter taught me that discipline isn't about punishment. It's about future-proofing my happiness. I also learned that I've been choosing the wrong hard. I was choosing the hard of being stuck and complaining because it felt familiar, but that hard never gets better. I'm learning to embrace the hard of growth. I've started to change my social circle in my head, focusing more on the voices of people who inspire me rather than the voices of those who want me to stay the same. Most importantly, I've learned that the future I want is built out of the minutes and hours I usually waste. Chapter 7, From Self-Sabotage to Self-Mastery. In the final chapter of The Mountain Is You, Brianna Wiest brings the entire journey to a crescendo. This chapter is about the after state. What happens when you are no longer the obstacle in your own path? Self-mastery, as Wiest describes it, isn't a destination where you become a perfect, emotionless robot. Rather, it is the state of being completely self-aligned, where your actions, thoughts, and subconscious desires finally pull in the same direction. 1. The integration of the self. The core of self-mastery is integration. Throughout the book, Wiest describes the civil war between the conscious and subconscious mind. Chapter 7 explains that mastery is the peace treaty. When you achieve self-mastery, you no longer need to force yourself to be disciplined or convince yourself to be happy. Instead, you have done the deep work of convincing your subconscious that growth is safe. You have integrated your shadow, the parts of yourself you used to be ashamed of, and turned that energy into fuel. You are no longer divided. You are a singular force of nature. 2. The difference between success and peace. Wiest makes a crucial distinction in this final stage. Success is an external metric, but self-mastery is an internal one. Many people climb the mountain only to realize they climbed the wrong one because they were seeking external validation. Self-mastery is characterized by internal peace. It is the ability to be okay regardless of what is happening in the outside world. This doesn't mean you stop achieving. It means your achievement is no longer a requirement for your self-worth. You do great things because you are a great person, not because you are trying to prove you aren't a failure. 3. Intuition as the new operating system. Once the noise of fear and self-sabotage is gone, your intuition becomes your primary guide. Wiest describes self-mastery as the ability to hear your inner voice with absolute clarity. In this state, decision-making becomes effortless. You no longer need to poll 20 friends for their opinion or spend weeks weighing pros and cons. You know what is right for you because you are no longer filtering your life through the lens of trauma. You trust yourself, and that trust is the ultimate form of power. 4. The new normal. Wiest discusses the concept of the upper limit one last time. In self-mastery, you have finally raised your baseline to a level where good things feel normal. You no longer wait for the other shoe to drop. You have expanded your capacity to hold joy, abundance, and love. You realize that the mountain wasn't actually there to punish you. It was there to make you strong enough to handle the life you always said you wanted. You had to become the person who could survive the climb so that you could be the person who can sustain the view from the top. 5. Passing the torch. The final step of self-mastery is looking back on the mountain and realizing that your struggle was never just for you. By overcoming your self-sabotage, you provide a blueprint for others to do the same. Wiest suggests that our greatest purpose is often found in the very things we once struggled with the most. Your healed mountain becomes the foundation upon which you help others build their lives. What I've learned, and I learned that the goal of my life isn't to be finished or perfect. It's to be the master of my own experience. I realized that the mountain was actually a gift. It was the only thing that could have forced me to develop the emotional intelligence and strength I have now. What I've learned that I don't need to fear my shadow or my past mistakes anymore. They were just steps on the path. Most importantly, I have learned that peace is a practice, not a prize. Why? I now understand that I am not my thoughts. I am not my feelings, and I am not my past. I am the one who chooses what to do with them. I am the mountain, and I am also the climber. The ultimate lesson of this book is that your internal resistance is not a sign that you are broken, but a signal that you are ready to outgrow your current life. You learn that the mountain you face is simply an accumulation of old survival mechanisms and unprocessed fears that no longer serve you. By taking radical responsibility for your habits and learning to sit with the discomfort of change, you stop being a victim of your past and become the master of your future. The summit isn't about achieving a perfect life, but about finally becoming a person you can trust. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Please subscribe to my channel.